They are the monarchs of the Alaskan wilderness. No other creature walking the tundra commands respect or stirs the imagination more than an Alaska grizzly. Alaska is the last stronghold of the grizzly in North America. In the lower 48, grizzlies have all but disappeared. In Alaska, with millions of acres of wilderness and a bounty of food, the bears are thriving. Around 30,000 grizzlies inhabit the plains, forests, and mountains of Alaska. Their range stretches from the southeast Alaska Panhandle to the Arctic Ocean. Although they are the same species, coastal bears who get fat on salmon are called brown bears. The interior bears are called grizzlies. They are usually smaller than their coastal cousins because their diet is predominantly vegetarian. This is the story of these great Alaskan bears and how in Alaska, people and bears live side by side. It's early summer in Denali National Park, and a bear jam has developed on the park road. The shuttle buses which carry visitors to the heart of this park always stop for wildlife. But if it's a grizzly, you get a real traffic jam. This is a real treat. A female grizzly nursing her yearling cubs right next to the road. Denali National Park is to Alaska what the Serengeti is to Africa. This remote wilderness is one of the prime viewing areas for Alaska's vast wildlife. Every summer, up to 250,000 visitors abandon their campers and buses to spend at least one day inside Denali Park. The visitors rarely, if ever, leave disappointed, especially if they catch a glimpse of spectacular Mount McKinley. it rises from the tundra to touch the sky at 20,320 feet. Denali, as Alaskans called this mountain, is so tall that it creates its own weather. It is a wondrous exclamation point on the magnificent Denali Park landscape. In Denali Park, bands of Dall sheep browse on the high ridges and caribou roam the tundra. This herd stops momentarily at the sight of a lone male bear grazing just a few yards away. This grizzly would love to turn, run, and catch a caribou. No doubt he's tried it before. But an adult grizzly knows the chase is not worth the expended energy. A grizzly is too slow to win a foot race with a healthy caribou or moose. The 300 or so grizzlies in Denali Park are by necessity mainly vegetarians. They graze on grasses and roots and berries. Their sharp claws are efficient at digging beneath the tundra for the succulent, life-sustaining roots of the pea vine. It takes a lot of roots and grasses to fill a grizzly. If the opportunity presents itself, they will pursue game, wounded or old caribou or moose, or newborn calves unable to protect themselves. Some bears have become so efficient at finding moose calves that in some parts of the park they kill virtually all of the newborn of the year. Their sense of smell is keen. A grizzly can detect the presence of prey even a mile away. While the cubs play, the wind shifts and Mom detects a familiar scent. She's detected a scent only a quarter of a mile away. A moose calf lies on the floor of Igloo Canyon where it died of natural causes. For 3 days, its mother has stood nearby to protect her young. In a twist of fate, she is browsing across the ravine when the bears arrive. The bears will feed until full and then rest nearby. As wildlife photographers document this event, the bear picks up the scent of the moose and gives chase. She knows from experience that often moose cows give birth to 2 or 3 calves.
Circle back.
This is the true drama of the Alaskan wilderness. The most abundant source of protein for the grizzlies of Denali is not large game at all. Grizzlies love to eat ground squirrels. This bear is digging at the den of a clan of squirrels. With her sharp claws and powerful forearms, she excavates the tundra and catches the squirrels at home. Oftentimes, burrows have front doors and back doors. The grizzly knows it's just a matter of time before the squirrel inside makes a break for it. With a burst of speed and the moves of a halfback, the race is quickly over. Watching grizzlies in Denali is not always high drama. It's often quite humorous. This sleepy bear is trying to take a siesta during a hot summer day. She tries everything to get just a few minutes of shut-eye. It's just no use. Young bears are especially curious about their environment, and they love to play. Signs warning of dangerous bear activity attract cubs like kids to a toy store. This cub is now destroying government property, but no one is anxious to enforce the laws. There are no trees on the tundra, but for back scratching, the signpost will do just fine. It's not surprising that sometimes grizzlies interact with the visitors in Denali National Park. Standing next to a shuttle bus is acceptable behavior. Stirring up trouble in a campground is not. These bear technicians are getting ready to recondition a troublesome bear.
And so they come in to people's camps. We've had about 3 different instances of bears coming up, sniffing your tent. You're asleep at night and you wake up and there's a bear outside shaking your tent, that sort of thing. Usually they just go away if you make noise. You know, people make noise and the bear will go away. But it's just a pattern that we don't like to perpetuate.
Hopefully, we'll see how she reacts to our camp. And if she goes away, great. If she's interested, then we might do some aversive conditioning. But, shooting her with firecrackers, shooting her with plastic bullets.
All right, let's go.
Different flavors. All come out of a 12-gauge shotgun. These are firecrackers. They'll shoot out and kind of blow up. It's pretty fun. These are this is a plastic slug where hits them but doesn't, hurts a lot but doesn't injure the bear. And then these are rifle slugs in case everything doesn't go as planned.
Because of efforts like this, most Denali grizzlies learn to avoid conflict with people. But visitors must also show respect for the power and untamed nature of the Denali grizzly. With cooperation, bears in Denali Park will continue to run wild for future generations to watch and enjoy. The most incredible gathering of brown bears in the world occurs at McNeil River State Game Sanctuary, just 225 miles southwest of Anchorage on Lower Cook Inlet. Each summer, Mother Nature rings a dinner bell that draws up to 125 bears to this isolated area. The attraction is a torrent of fat chum salmon that challenge McNeil's rushing waters and churning falls each July and August. Every year, dozens of hungry bears are there to greet them. Often standing chest deep in white water, bears gorge themselves around the clock in a summer feeding frenzy. A permit to visit McNeil River is the dream of any bear viewer. Each spring, thousands of hopefuls apply for permits awarded by state-run lottery. Only 10 per day, approximately 400 per season, will actually win the privilege of sharing the river with McNeil's fishing bears. The bears' journey to McNeil starts when they emerge from dens in spring. Some of the dens are within a mile or two of McNeil. Others may cross 75 miles of Alaskan wilderness to reach this life-sustaining river. Most human visitors make longer treks to McNeil, arriving from all around the world. All traveled the last 70-odd miles via float plane from Homer, Alaska, an hour-long flight filled with excitement and anticipation. As the plane crosses the frigid waters of Cook Inlet, it slides past sometimes active Augustine volcano to Kamishak Bay. This remote southeastern coast of the Alaska Peninsula is classical bear country. As the aircraft banks to land, McNeil River and the falls are visible below. By the time the plane's floats touch McNeil Cove, passengers have been treated to a brief aerial tour of the terrain. Unloading the plane is a community effort. The usual cargo, food for a week or more, rugged tents, sleeping bags, fishing poles, and enough camera gear and film to stock a store. Once gear is carried to camp, it's time for an orientation talk.
My name is John. I'm one of the 3 Fish and Game personnel here. Derek and Larry are up at the falls now with the other folks. This is the cook
Quickly,
shack.
John explains that all cooking is done in the cook shack. Drinking water comes in a rain barrel or from a nearby creek during sunny spells. But someone asks, what if we're alone and encounter a bear near camp?
And if you see it and you don't think it sees you, make some noise, clap, yell at it, say, hello bear, I'm here, and just back up so it can go by if it really wants to come in your direction.
In fact, visitors encounter bears everywhere. On this afternoon, a mother and her 2 spring cubs amble across McNeil Cove tide flats in front of camp. These mudflats are a vital part of the ecosystem at McNeil. Mothers with cubs or adolescent bears too timid to compete for fish at crowded McNeil Falls often cruise this shallow intertidal area in search of fish scraps or stranded fish. At McNeil, the regular rhythms of the sea combine with incredible wildlife and the solitude of wilderness Alaska. It is a natural spectacle unique in all the world.
The Skin So Soft works. Medical letter reviewed it in Alaska. Skin So Soft works, but it only works for a half hour to an hour.
The next morning, excitement mounts as everyone gets ready for their first hike to McNeil River Falls. This is B-Day, Bear Day. The 10 permit holders will be escorted by fish and game biologist Larry Allmiller, known by many as the Bear Man of McNeil River.
There's some mud that we cross, so you might need walking sticks if your boots don't fit very well. You might consider that.
In 1993, Larry marked his 18th consecutive summer at McNeil. As a result of his studies there, he is arguably the best bear behaviorist in the world. Because this is bear country, Allmiller carries a firearm when escorting visitors. But to his credit, he's never fired in self-defense. It's soon evident why. Bears and human visitors alike are put at ease by Larry's soft-spoken, confident manner.
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. Haven't lost anybody yet.
Well, this is the widest part, so it's going to have to go through here first.
Every step of the 2-mile walk to McNeil Falls can be an adventure. Just a few steps out of camp, they encounter a red fox.
Or rabbit. No, if we don't, we treat them kind of like bears.
On the trail ahead, a young grizzly searches for salmon. Bear tracks in the mud emphatically point the way to the falls. The roar and majesty of McNeil Falls, punctuated by the sight and sound of fishing brown bears, makes an indelible impression on the group as they crest the last ridge. Home for a day is a gravel viewing pad. There aren't any physical barricades to separate or protect the bear watchers. Bears have simply learned to respect the pad as people territory at McNeil Falls. Incredibly, the bears have learned that people don't compete for fish or threaten their cubs. The two-legged observers just stand at the same place every time and watch. For the bears, people are as insignificant as the gulls. A visitor's first close encounter with a bear might border on being frightening. The second is exciting. But McNeil bears will often walk within a few feet of the observers. Soon having a bear just a few feet away becomes old hat. Even without the special human-bear interaction, the McNeil River experience is exceptional, extraordinary, simply beyond compare. The main reason is the unique interaction of the bears at McNeil Falls. Usually solitary animals, the bounty of McNeil entices them to endure close contact with their own kind in order to feast on the abundant salmon at McNeil Falls. During the peak of the chum salmon run, as many as 67 bears have been seen from the observation pad at one time. Half-ton males almost rub shoulders with mothers and their cubs as they share the rich salmon bounty. But the gathering of bears is not without conflict, and of necessity, a hierarchy develops. Typically, big dominant bears claim prime fishing territory. Lesser bears move, or are soon forced to. Size, however, is not always the factor. Watch as this female with triplets stands off a much larger male. Relatively unimpressed, the male is back just a few minutes later. Conflicts between bears often lead to injury, evidenced by scars they carry, each a mark of battles won and lost. To track the comings and goings of McNeil's bears, biologists have given many names. Sometimes the bears are named after people. Other names are descriptive of physical features. This is Raleigh and her triplets. RC is short for Reggie's cub. He's in his late teens, and after a summer feast of salmon weighs nearly 1,000 pounds. A bear this size eats up to 60 pounds of salmon a day. In the far corner, Harley discusses fishing etiquette with little dark monkey face. The ability to associate names with bears makes a visit to McNeil more personal. The bear-human relationship becomes more intimate.
Probably one of my favorite things was when Teddy came up and took a nap about 5 feet away from where we were standing, and she just was real comfortable and took a little nap.
There was a bear standing, I bet, 5 feet from me and looked me right in the eye, and that was quite intimidating. Yeah.
That's a unique experience to have him just come up and lay down 10 feet away like a puppy at your fireplace. Yeah.
It's a very intimate experience, and it's phenomenal.
I think it's important to realize that we need to share the earth. The critters that can't speak for themselves need somebody to look out for them. And people that would say, let's save some bears, are doing that.
It's early July, and sockeyes, also known as red salmon, are thick in Brooks River. The thundering falls are the last physical barrier between these shimmering salmon and their spawning beds. In one of nature's great miracles, salmon return to the exact place of their creation after years at sea. Instinctively, relentlessly, they hurl themselves against the violent current, attempting to move upstream and complete their life cycle. The salmon hordes are vulnerable, slowed by a barrier falls. As a result, Brooks River has become a natural feeding place for a gathering of Alaskan brown bears second only to McNeil River. With salmon literally filling the stream, bears don't need to crowd around the best fishing spots at the falls. They can catch a bellyful just about anywhere. Time and time again, this big male grabs a fish and strips the fatty skin. Already stuffed, he will only eat the high-fat portions, skin, eggs, and brains, discarding the rest. This is a typical midsummer day on the river. With food so easy to come by, this couple can make time for courtship. Bears aren't the only creatures attracted to this fish-filled river. Located in Katmai National Park on the Alaska Peninsula, Brooks River is known to tourists worldwide as a place to watch bears and catch trophy-sized trout and abundant salmon. From June till August, planes full of visitors arrive daily. Though usually the domain of bears, the Naknek Lake beach near Brooks Camp becomes an air taxi parking lot.
So I want to welcome you here to Katmai National Park in Brooks Camp.
Avoiding a bear-human conflict is one of the greatest challenges of the rangers who manage this national park. All visitors arriving near the campground complex called Brooks Camp are given a bear talk, basic instruction on park rules and how to act in bear country.
We're concerned with maintaining this population and the situation that we have here where people can come to Brooks Camp and actually live closely with the brown bears. And people and bears have been here coexisting for about 4,000 years, as near as we can tell, and we can continue that in the future if everybody follows the simple regulations.
First, don't approach bears closer than 50 to 100 yards. Next, slowly walk away from any approaching bear. Finally, fishermen who have hooked a fish must cut their lines and get out of the water if a bear approaches. Unlike McNeil River, there isn't a permit system at Katmai, and tourists roam unguided. Sometimes it's a three-ring circus of fishermen, photographers, and bears. When this youngster decides to walk across the bridge, rangers clear everyone away.
We might even be impeding on this bear trying to make its turn. We can be an intimidator, this many people. If you want to back up, we might give you that leeway. It might take the coastline. And
bears can pop up just about anywhere around Brooks River and Naknek Lake. This mother is bringing her 1.5-year-old triplets to the mouth of Brooks River near the footbridge. The young bears play endlessly, while Mom goes shopping for fresh fish. During times when salmon are less plentiful in the river channel, bears are forced to congregate at the falls. Some bears catch jumping salmon in midair with the precision of a major league outfielder. As at McNeil River, the best fishing spots go to the strongest bears. This boar, known as Diver because of the way he fishes, shows the marks of battles that won him the right to prime fishing territory. Females nursing cubs have an especially high demand for food, and sometimes are forced to bring their cubs to the crowd scene at the falls. Here, spring cubs wait on the bank as their mother fishes nervously. Later, sensing danger, she forces them to take refuge in a nearby spruce tree. There's always a risk when cubs are separated from their mother. Unattended cubs may fall prey to other bears. A mother brown bear will furiously defend her young, even against attack by a dominant boar twice her size. Watching bears at Katmai is becoming very popular. Increasing visitor pressure often keeps the Park Service viewing platform crowded from sunup to sundown. The people who manage Katmai National Park must wrestle with a perplexing question. How can they preserve this amazing opportunity to socialize with Alaska's brown bears? Finding an answer will not be easy. Each summer, a sea of lush greenery coats the flanks of Kodiak Island, giving rise to its reputation as Alaska's Emerald Isle. Moisture-filled clouds frequently roll across this ocean-sculpted island, their heavy rains replenishing its many lakes and streams. This is July, and the island's rivers teem with millions of salmon returning to spawn. Its hills and meadows are home to delicate black-tailed deer. It is an island reflection of Alaska's natural bounty. It is also home to Alaska's only genetically separate race of brown bears, the Kodiak brown bear. Here, an incredibly rich salmon diet fattens nearly 3,000 Kodiak browns each summer. That number equates to 1 bear per square mile of land, and approximately 1 bear for every 4 of the island's 12,000 human residents. Kodiak's bears may be North America's largest brown bears. Some giants tip the scales at 1,500 pounds. In 1990, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service launched a bear watching program within the 1.6 million acre Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge. It's a lottery permit system patterned after McNeil Rivers.
This is a bear activity zone right here. You'll get plenty of traffic when they're in feeding close right off the front here. They'll be going back and forth, sometimes climbing across the weir. And that's where you'll be sitting.
Fish and Wildlife Service officer Scott Shelton shows the first excited drawing winners the plywood viewing blind at Dog Salmon Creek, the pilot location for the new viewing program.
That's the blind.
The Alaska Department of Fish and Game operates a weir and fish ladder at Dog Salmon Creek. Without the fish ladder, the heavy flow over Dog Salmon Falls thwarts the return of hordes of spawning salmon. This bountiful food supply attracts at least 6 family groups, more than 24 bears in all. These yearling cubs watch intently as their mother fishes under the weir. It appears she wants to keep the catch to herself. Several times a day, a big female called Miss Mosey brings her newborn spring cubs to the fishing pool below Dog Salmon Falls. Ever wary, Miss Mosey keeps a watchful eye for potential threats from other bears. Miss Mosey wears a radio collar fitted to her by researchers. Its signals are used to track her movement. Radio tracking allows biologists to discover how far she ranges in search of food and shelter. They look like teddy bears, but these twins are sharp-clawed dynamos. Both sport natal collars of white fur, common to young cubs. Curious about everything, the cubs even give a low-flying magpie a second look. This time the family leaves the river without a fish, but they'll return to try again in the morning. From dusk to dawn, the bears repeat their pattern, approaching the stream, snagging a quick meal, and retreating to rest and digest. Like a glorious nature film, these intimate scenes of Alaskan wilderness unfold daily before those fortunate enough to be in the photographer's blind. In 1992, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service moved the bear viewing station away from Dog Salmon Creek. The move in part because of the presence of the fish ladder. The old Dog Salmon Creek site is a microcosm of recent conflicts between man and brown bears in Alaska. The weir symbolizes man's competition with bears for an environmental resource. Happily, bears at Dog Salmon Creek have actually benefited, but that's a rare exception. Historically, it's a competition the bears usually lose. Perhaps the best example of how man and bears can coexist in the same environment comes from the dense jungle-like rainforest of Admiralty Island in southeast Alaska. As many as 2,000 brown bears move among the shadows of old-growth forest. In July, the bears are irresistibly drawn to the streams, just as salmon are compelled to complete their migration. For years, photographers have also been attracted to Admiralty Island, and with a measure of precaution, walked among the bears. The man who once lived in this cabin is largely responsible for the bears' tolerance. His name was Stan Price. From the late 1950s until his death in 1989, Price homesteaded at the mouth of Pack Creek. This was the view looking out his front door. Price chose to live in the middle of one of the densest population of brown bears in the world. He respected the bears, and they accepted him. It helped that the area had been closed to hunting since the mid-1930s, but most important was his belief that humans and bears can live side by side. His woodshed is still full. His legacy endures. Pack Creek is a 30-minute float plane ride from Juneau, Alaska's state capital. This German couple heard about Pack Creek and had to come see the bears for themselves.
Oh, can I see your permit? Did you get a permit in Juneau when you came out?
You need it just now?
Yeah, I need to look at it.
It used to be that anyone could come and go from Pack Creek. But to protect this unique experience from its own popularity, a permit system was put in place. Without a permit, you get back on the plane.
The most important thing is, do you have any food in your pack or anything like gum or...
This is in that one, yeah.
Okay.
We have to locate somewhere.
Okay, yeah, there's a place right up here in the trees where there's some buckets on strings.
Yeah.
And we'll put the stuff, your food, anything that smells like food inside the bucket and run it up the tree so that the bears can't get at it. And there's been no problem. We've never had a bear trying to get into the buckets or anything. And the reason for that mainly is because we don't want bears to associate people with food.
Yeah.
Because there's some bears here in the past who have gotten into packs and gotten a sandwich or something like that as a reward. And what that means is that they're coming back looking for more the next time a tourist shows up.
At Pack Creek, there have been two designated areas for bear watching: a gravel bar near the Stan Price homestead, and a log tower erected about a half a mile up the creek. Upriver, the salmon are spawning in the gravel beds. The gulls are loud and rowdy. Occasionally, they dive, stealing eggs from the salmon below. A single brown bear ambles along a shallow side stream, and out of sight catches a fish. It's a hot summer day at Pack Creek. Like all the other places in Alaska where bears gather, Pack Creek has a social hierarchy. A female known as Blackie is chasing a subordinate bear away. It's possible that the bear she's chasing is actually her 3-year-old cub from the preceding litter. The youngster turns as if asking, "Why me?" Even after a nip on the rear, the youngster begs to understand why he's being chased. And so, life goes on at Pack Creek. The photographers will all leave here with prized pictures, prized as reminders of an incredible experience. Few men and women in all the world have stood with an Alaskan grizzly. The stories they tell, the kinship they now feel, may be all that's needed to protect and preserve these monarchs of the Alaskan wilderness.